Thank you for joining us. Our next presentation is by Sarah Prosser, who's going to talk to us about her experiences as a bereaved sibling. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Joanne. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm actually living in Leicester at the moment, but if you are in Nottingham or any of the local area, you may know my sister Caroline. This is the lovely Caroline. She was diagnosed in August 2004. She had osteosarcoma. This photo is actually really important to me because if you look at the photo carefully, you can actually see it in her arm. This is actually a day or two just before she was diagnosed. The main difference between Caroline's journey was the fact that she was very lucky to be diagnosed immediately. We didn't have the to and fro that a lot of people do between GPs, between hospitals and x-rays. We literally went in thinking that she'd broken her arm, and we were told that night. We even got to meet her consultant that night there in A&E, and it's lucky because he just happened to be there looking after another patient who'd come in. So luckily we were very fortunate to be able to have an immediate diagnosis. That is the one good thing about Caroline's story compared to a lot of other people's. She started chemo almost immediately. We didn't have radiotherapy to start with. She did start straight with chemotherapy. This went on until the December 2004. She actually had an operation booked just before Christmas to remove part of the bone and then the tumour that they had presumed had already shrunk. When they did the final x-ray, when we got to Birmingham Hospital, it actually got cancelled. Our parents just said to us that it was due to like her blood levels or something, but unfortunately found out on the Boxing Day of all days that it was actually because they needed to amputate her arm just below the elbow. This literally happened 2 days after. We went straight back to Birmingham Hospital. Our consultant, Professor Walker, was absolutely incredible in telling us. My mum and dad obviously already knew. They took me and Caroline into hospital with them on the Boxing Day, and he was incredible at how he explained it. He literally drew a picture of an arm, drew the bone, drew the tumour, and explained it as though she just wouldn't have that part of her arm anymore. Obviously at that age, I was only 12, Caroline was 9. We're not going to know what the word amputation means. So he was absolutely incredible with that. Over the next course of the 18 months, she had chemo. She did then later receive radiotherapy because she went into remission only for it to come back in various body parts, including her spine. And this is when they started the radiotherapy. We were told that Caroline's cancer returned, which would have been the final time, in August 2006, and therefore we were rushing around trying to get a wish granted from another charity that we worked for. We only wished on a star. We were lucky enough to swim with dolphins, but lo and behold, to us, we didn't know why we were now in such a rush. In April 2007, our parents were told that we'd only have Caroline for another 4 weeks or so. This is something that was kept secret to me and Caroline, and it's something that I've talked about with Joanne and the guys on bone cancer a lot lately, especially in kind of preparing for this presentation. And it's something I look back at now, and I, you know, having not known that I was only going to have my sister for 4 weeks, it's something of would I wanted to have known. And it's something that, as much as I understand why my parents hid it, and hid a lot of things throughout that time, it is something that I maybe look back now and I wish I had known, not for the 4 weeks, just for a few days, just so I could have said those, almost like a final goodbye, as morbid as that seems. But she actually did pass away 4 weeks that day on May the 27th in 2007. Me, my mum and dad were all there with her at the time as well. The big thing about this presentation is when I was speaking to Siobhan and Joanne and the team at Bone Cancer, and the area that I've maybe struggled with most over the last few years is not having another sibling who has been in the same situation. Not someone of my age, I'm nearly 30 now, so I'm a lot older than some of the other siblings that have lost people. But I've not had a sibling to talk to. I've not had any kind of experience of meeting other siblings who have lost someone to bone cancer. And when we were talking about what we want to do in this presentation, it kind of came to the conclusion that actually, as much as also we're going to talk about Caroline and her journey, it's actually to show a sibling's point of view. and it feels a little bit weird talking about myself during this presentation for obviously this reason, but I know how important it is, not only to like me and other siblings, but also to parents, to kind of see the point of view from the other sibling who is sat at home or being tossed from house to house. I will go more into that, but that's a little bit why I'm going to be talking about myself a little bit more rather than Caroline, as weird as that seems. So obviously with my side of the journey, it was obviously very different from Caroline. So she was going through her own journey and I was going through my own as a sibling. And there's a lovely photo there in our football shirts. We were both big Leeds United supporters due to my uncle supporting Leeds. But the whole 3 years that Caroline was having treatment, a sibling, it's hard looking back now because it was 14 years ago and I was only, you know, between 12 and 16. But I just remember there was a lot of not feeling forgotten about, but Caroline would get a lot more attention, would also get a lot more presents, a lot more gifts. Obviously she's in hospital, so that was fully allowed. But it was more like the secrets being hidden. We didn't know. To start with, I didn't know that Caroline actually had cancer. That word wasn't used with me. I was never told that it was bone cancer or the tumour. I actually found out from mum's friend at the time, was telling his dad that Caroline had cancer, and that was how I found out. So it was a lot of not necessarily on purpose, and obviously we were being protected, but there's a lot of secrets hidden, especially towards the end when, you know, if we were told that Caroline was going to Florida so quickly for a specific reason, like not having that long left, and then obviously with having 4 weeks, I understand obviously why any parent would hide that, and it must be the hardest decision to make. But yeah, I do wish I'd had that little bit of time, even at that age, just to talk to Caroline, to say goodbye, just so we knew. It was like the little things for me. I remember going between my mum's house, my dad's house, friends' houses, at school. Obviously, I was still trying to go to school at the same time because I was doing my GCSEs for the last year that we had her. And I just remember not knowing like where I was going to be like the next week. And luckily we had such amazing grandparents as well, that they were always supportive of us and were always there to help as well. One of the things that it still happens now, even 14 years later, is being asked how my mum and dad are, but not me. I can literally bump into someone in Tesco. It happened last year. I bumped into someone in Tesco back in Nottingham and they were like, oh, how's your mum? And there was no, how are you? And it was always at the time. I remember people used to phone, especially after we lost Caroline, and they'd be like, oh, how's your mum? How's your dad? It was never, how are you? And it still happens now. It still happens to this day. One of the things I kind of feel towards, especially at the end, looking back, I felt very guilty, not necessarily like for any specific reason or, you know, for Caroline being ill like that, you know, that wasn't my fault. But for like almost carrying on, like still going to school, still going out with friends, almost like for enjoying life. I did feel guilty. I remember a couple of points I felt mad, not because of also the situation, but being at home. It was a stupid little argument I will never forget. I had like a single bed on the floor and Caroline had a bunk bed, and Caroline was really ill and couldn't get into her bunk bed, so I asked her to go into my bed, and I had a full-blown strop about it. And even that makes me feel guilty now, like 15 years later, because I just, looking back, I was like, so selfish, but I had no idea truly what was going on. And again, I'll come back to that later. But yeah, it was a case of not knowing or not understanding what was going on. And in the end, I just became the girl whose sister is sick, or the girl who lost a sister by the end of it. So obviously we lost Caroline in 2007. And from a sibling point of view, you would expect grief, upset. And yeah, of course, I had all that. But Caroline's journey finishing made mine just begin. And I kind of feel like I was literally days away from my GCSEs. I went back to school the same week. I even went to see Girls Aloud in concert the night she died. with a friend because Caroline was so excited, and I still wanted to go. And then I went to a friend's house the next day and almost just carried on as normal. And again, I think it's because I wasn't really aware of what had happened and the true like depth of what had happened. All I know is that my sister had gone, and that's it. And like I've just got to carry on now. And that is generally one of the last things I remember from that time. I feel like my mind has blanked quite a lot of it out. I'm sure if anyone's been in a similar situation, you'll kind of get that. And I bet you guys feel the same. So this always makes me laugh. So I didn't know on this screen how much detail to go into. I can only apologise to my parents if they're about to find anything out that they don't actually know. So yeah, how to cope how to cope losing a sister as a teenager. Again, I was 15. And I went back to school for a few months, but quickly the little like traits that I was about to have started to make an appearance. I had a tattoo at 16, and the following week I cut all my hair off, and I told my mum both of these details on her shop floor at work, so she couldn't shout at me, and I'll never forget that. I feel like that was only the beginning. I had a tattoo of Caroline's initials at 16. I don't know how I got away with it. And then I cut all my hair off. But the main thing for me, and I think the main thing for anyone who does know me, and it's something that I am generally quite open about when I kind of get to know you properly. And I spoke to a lot of the bone cancer guys over the last few weeks about it. But by 17, I was out drinking pretty much most weekends. I had a fake ID. I had like a friend's ID. And that kind of spiraled from there. And again, that's something that I can go into. But I quickly failed college. I did my first year of A-levels and failed them all. But I got kicked out, but got a full-time job straight away. But also getting a full-time job comes with more money to buy more alcohol and anything else. And I then quickly got myself into debt. Over a few years, I got into a lot of debt. And I know a lot of people have spoken before when I've spoken to them, or you see it online, that a lot of coping mechanisms are by spending money, especially with like depression and anxiety. And unfortunately, between drinking and getting myself into debt, they were my two biggest traits and my two biggest downfalls. It didn't help that I did feel like my family seemed to not move on without Caroline, because obviously she will always be there. Both my parents remarried, which is amazing. My dad even went on to have 2 more kids. I now have another younger brother and sister. But at that time, at that age, when I still really didn't know what was going on, it kind of felt like everybody was moving on. So I guess that I just presumed that that's what I had to do as well. So for years, I still had no idea what had happened. I didn't really know what cancer was or why Caroline had it, how she had it. I didn't understand why she had to have her arm amputated. I didn't know why she'd gone and why she was taken away from us. I'd still never, by this point, heard of bone cancer or osteosarcoma, other than the fact it may have been mentioned from time to time between parents and friends and whatnot when they were talking about Caroline. As far as I was aware, my sister had just died after 3 years of being sick, and life just had to carry on. But luckily, around 9-10 years ago, so by this point, I would have been around 20, and it would have been about 4 or 5 years after losing Caroline. I was actually contacted by the lovely Kate from Bone Cancer. I literally can't remember, and I wish I could, but I think she just found me online and contacted me to write an article for a local paper for Bone Cancer Awareness Week. And this is the first time I'd ever heard of Bone Cancer Research Trust. And I've put a photo of the article there because I've still got it to this day because it was my first one of many since then. But for the first time in 4 or 5 years since losing Caroline, I was actually able to search and learn not only about cancer, but bone cancer as well, and especially osteosarcoma. Caroline, the cancer that she had, again, I didn't know anything about it. And it gave me that chance to learn more about the battle that she went through as well, obviously before we finally lost her. So it kind of brought to light a little bit more of why she went through it, but not only why she went through it, but what she exactly went through, like what the chemo did, what the radiotherapy did. I was finally learning for myself exactly what happened, because again, I feel like I've been very shielded from everything. And again, at that age, I understand. I was, you know, as I said, between 12 and 15. So I was finally learning again for myself what was finally going on. So obviously it will never be possible to move on altogether, but I was able to accept what had happened. And then even meeting the guys at Brain Cancer Research Trust had allowed me to open up more, talk to other people, I could meet people. There was just so many connections between everyone. And I've been with them, as I said, 9 or 10 years now. And it's been absolutely amazing to have these guys. But yeah, after years of drinking to forget and getting into trouble, causing mayhem with my family, I finally felt like I was allowed to live my life purely because I'd learned more about what had happened and why it had happened. And that's with a massive thanks to these guys. So 14 years on, there's me, my little baby. My little doggy, Ralph, is baby. He even has a Brain Cancer Research Trust t-shirt. But it's been 14 years this year since we lost Caroline. And I still battle every day with losing a sibling. It's not something that's ever going to go away. But it's the little things that, unless you've been through that situation, you wouldn't consider it becoming a trigger, but little things every day, people would never think about until you're in this situation. But little things, like I got a tattoo when I was 16 of Caroline's initials, and people constantly ask what it means. If it's someone new, especially because if I've had new jobs, people ask what it means if they've never seen it, and then I have to explain it. Again, yeah, getting new jobs or meeting new people in general, people always go, oh, have you got a new sibling or any siblings, or have you got any brothers or sisters? And to start with, obviously I would say about Caroline, but now I'm so lucky enough to have my little brother and sister on my dad's side. I just say it about them now sometimes. I mean, it can vary. If I feel like I'm going to know them for a while, I'll explain, or if I've known them for a little while, I'll explain. But if not, I'd just be like, oh yeah, I've got 11-year-old brother and sister. I tend to not mention Caroline, just because if you have that conversation so often, you just can't, mentally you can't have that conversation over and over again. Two of the biggest things probably are, for me, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, were getting married, and then obviously having a hen do. Ironically, the hen do was harder than my actual wedding to do without Caroline. I think because it's all the girls and it's one of those things that she should be organising, and it's the little things like that I never thought about 10 years ago, that I'd actually have to do it without her. And until I've actually come to do it without her, I didn't really think about it. I didn't really realise. So yes, that was interesting to get married without her. And then even, I think one of the biggest things I thought of lately as well is, especially obviously having new jobs, and because of our job as pub managers, we move around the country quite a lot. And that means we've become really good friends with certain people. I've got some amazing best friends who we've met over the last 2-3 years, one of who even climbed a mountain with me in memory of Caroline a few weeks ago. Having never met Caroline and having Caroline never met her. So to have Caroline not meet a best friend who would do that for her, that breaks me a little bit. Or even she's not even met my husband. My husband's never met my sister. Little things like that I never thought about 10 years ago until it actually happens. And it's almost like I feel like someone should have prepared me for it. I can imagine if there's siblings out there now that are only just turning 16, 17, may not think about all these things that they might have to do in 10 to 15 years time, and that's where they're going to need that support from their parents. And again, 14 years on, as I said, I've got another brother and sister who've never met as well, but it is nice. I do talk to them about Caroline, so it is so lovely to have them. I think people assume after so long that you should just be over losing a sibling, and I can remember thinking, even just 2 or 3 years after, and I think someone actually turned around to me and was like, oh, have you not got over it yet? It will never go away. And as much as I feel like people will focus on the parents of that person that you've lost, the sibling does, quite frankly, almost not get forgotten about altogether, obviously. But the parents will always be the priority to anybody, which I do understand. But yeah, after 14 years, you'd think that you'd move on by now, and obviously that's never going to happen. Even after all this time, I'm actually back at AA meetings because of my drinking. I'm still on antidepressants, and I still battle with my mental health every day. It's something that I'm quite open about, and that's why I'll always support other people in the same boat. But yeah, after all this time, we still battle every day. I'm not the only one. everyone listening to this who's been in a similar situation will understand. And that's why I'm so glad that we all have each other. This year, however, I'm going to turn this into positive now before I start getting upset. This year, we actually launched Caroline's own charity with Bone Cancer Research Trust and When You Wish Upon a Star. We had an amazing conference call at the start of the year with Siobhan and the guys, with you guys. And I said I wanted to do something. I didn't know what, I just knew I wanted to do something. Over the last few years, we've done quite a lot for you guys anyway, and When You Wish Upon a Star. But I wanted to make something a lot more cement. I wanted to make something in Caroline's name. And luckily, both charities are so amazing that we do split all the funds. There's some great photos here of everything that we've done over the last few years. We've done 2 3,000-mile challenges now, where we've ran, cycled, swam 3,000 miles in a year. And we've had some amazing opportunities. We've done our own black tie balls. We've done a few of those. We've done 5Ks. And then, yeah, last year, we did another 3,000-mile. So during lockdown, that was definitely interesting. You'll probably recognise the lovely Pete, who also donated some of his miles, and he got involved as well. And everyone, all our friends and family got involved, which was amazing. So I'm going to leave you guys with 2 things, because I feel like I've rambled on enough now. But my dad once said, when you lose a parent, you lose part of your past. And when you lose a child, you lose part of your future. When you lose a sibling, you actually lose part of both, which I never thought about, but it is very true. And then the last thing I want to say is a massive thank you to everyone for listening. And I hope it's not been too rambly and boring. I do get very nervous when I'm talking about things like this. And I just want to thank Bone Cancer Research Trust for obviously letting me talk about not only Caroline, but myself. I know that was the whole point of this. And I've talked very quickly about my journey. And it can be an eye-opener for parents when they talk to me. So I will always be a phone call away to anybody. I've always said that. You can always find me on Facebook. And sometimes it is very different in these day and ages, because we do have social media and obviously the internet and a computer. Not everyone had those 15 years ago. So it is very different in these day and ages to meet other people like siblings, but I didn't have that, and I don't want any siblings to go through this feeling like they've not got anyone, feeling like they've got questions, feeling like they're being kept secrets from. And that is why I will always talk to anybody, any parents, about how to talk to them, or any siblings, anyone really. If anyone knows me, I'll talk anyone's ear off. I will always be there for anyone who has been through the same situation as me, and felt very hidden away from it and felt quite alone. But the only thing I'll leave you with is this post I actually took on the 2nd of September. It's actually got the date on it, 2014, in the bone cancer office. It was a post on the wall, and it says, "Doing nothing costs an arm and a leg." And again, that has stayed with me since then. I think especially obviously having Caroline had her arm amputated. So for that reason, I can't do nothing, and I won't do nothing. And I hope that you guys will all join me in doing that. So thank you very much.